Bitcoin is trading around $89,000. We've had probably the most boring weekend in terms of price action that we've seen in a while. We've literally just had a straight line of 1 hour candles. I kind of called for this on Friday. I kind of just said, like, don't expect too much volume going into the weekend. And even if there was any kind of like pump or dump, it's usually just a very, low liquidity based move where the market makers just kind of like try to make some money off of liquidating both the shorts and the longs. And, I think that nothing's really changed. I think that in the overall landscape of things are very bearish. I think that, we're about to close in this other week candle below the 50 simple week moving average, which is historically speaking, not well. We have a lot of just macro, doom and gloom, kind of like everyone on crypto Twitter, everyone's like miserable. There's been like no like real big kind of like developments other than everyone just being super bearish, calling for the end of the cycle, calling for $50,000 Bitcoin, saying that this whole like Bank of Japan interest rate hike is going to crash the market again another 20%. And in my opinion, I'm just like not really subscribing to that anymore. It's just like, it's like clockwork. Every single time there's like a new narrative, you have all the same like major pages and like, people kind of posting the same charts, using each other's charts and content, saying like, oh guys, we're going to go down here, and they kind of make all this like fear kind of happen. And, especially like over a weekend where all the markets are closing, like they're kind of, feeding off this fear to kind of like, make traders like, make kind of irrational decisions, in my opinion. And I think if you're in Bitcoin and crypto at this point, you're here for the long run. Like realistically speaking, I don't think anybody's selling their spot Bitcoin. And if they did, then they probably sold a lot higher. So you shouldn't be too worried if you're a longer term investor. Now, I already made a video kind of covering this topic, right? Where it's like you have these traders that are all like, they're kind of like the loudest ones right now, kind of saying like, oh guys, like we've been in this bearish trend, like you should have shorted. And like, coincidentally, like they're not posting any of their successful trades. They're just all saying that they've been right this whole time. And, I think that traders, like there is a time where they make their money and all that kind of stuff, but over a long time horizon, they don't really. Just kind of like that's how the markets go, right? Because over time, there's always going to be inflation. There's always going to be money printing. The fiat system is always going to be devalued against, assets like Bitcoin, gold, silver, stocks, real estate, etc. And so, obviously the bears are basically in control right now. I think that we have like some key levels of, resistance and support that we need to kind of maintain. I've always been very consistent. I think that, if we lose below $75,000, that's going to be where I would pretty much say like the cycle's probably over, and we can probably bet that this, the price of Bitcoin is going to go down. Do I think that that's necessarily a bad thing? No, because I'm a long-term investor and I like to add to my bags, and I don't want to be buying above $100,000. I don't think any of these major institutions are going to want to be buying above those prices. So, the only people, in my opinion, that are really worried that we're in a bear market are the ones that maybe are not prepared. Maybe they're new to crypto, or maybe they just don't have like any kind of money on the sideline to, add more to the positions if they're a long-term believer of Bitcoin. Now, obviously, I don't give financial advice and none of that kind of stuff. I don't even, advocate for leverage trading. I just kind of try to help you guys digest what's kind of going on in the market, because there's no shortage of just like opinions and, news articles that kind of come out, and crypto is a very fast moving market. It's also very fast growing. And so I think that this, sort of new year coming in with growth, and I say growth because we're going to go into this quantitative easing cycle, money printing. There's going to be a new Fed chair who, regardless of whoever the case it's going to be, they're going to be pro weak dollar. They're going to want to try to grow us out of this whole kind of like recessionary period that we're going through. And they're going to try to basically outpace like inflation by growing. And so that's going to be very good for risk on assets. Now, there's going to be a bit of a delay on that, and that all kind of remains to be seen. And so that's why I'm just, I'm kind of taking a step back. I haven't really been trading so much. I kind of like look at the charts and I kind of see what everyone's talking about, because I'm in like, different groups and all that kind of stuff. But, I don't think it's going to be anything that's like worthwhile to kind of like, ruin your day about and be, staring at charts, because I do think that it's going to be very choppy at best. And, I do see a scenario where we could go down and attack the lows again, maybe even go lower. I don't get excited until probably above like $100,000, just because that's above the 50 simple week moving average. That's a huge psychological area that I think that we would want to crack. And then I think that we have the 106 to 107K range to really, open the way for, another all-time high. But, the bulls have a lot of work, in my opinion, to kind of, to be done. And so I'm kind of focused on building other companies. I'm looking into like real estate opportunities, because real estate market's in shambles. And yeah, I'm going to continue to add to my longer term conviction plays in terms of, crypto. So, I'm going to be happy either way. I think that most people should have a different kind of outlook if they're, overwhelmed and just kind of worried about the price action. Kind of like take a step back and think about where you went wrong. Think about what you can do better the next time around, because there will be a next time. It's just a matter of, when that's going to happen, right? Now, side note, Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on around the world, and I just want to give, some thoughts, prayers, all that kind of stuff to all these like huge casualty sort of events. Like nobody should ever go through losing a loved one or, such violence. I think that the world needs to prevail. I think cooler heads will prevail over time, but the amount of like, the like stuff that's kind of going on, right? I think you guys, I don't know what I'm allowed to really say on here, but it's been going on. There's been, I think, like 3 shootings maybe at this point, and I hate to see it. It breaks my heart. These are all like family members of people, loved ones, especially around the holidays, which is always a very heavy time. It just, it hits pretty hard, and I feel so bad for the people. And I think that, if anybody's here watching, regardless of whatever side of any kind of aisle that you're on, we can all agree that violence is never the solution. And so just, maybe say a prayer if you're someone who's religious, or just, throw some good thoughts their way, because a lot of people are going through a lot of things, especially around this time. So with that being said, I'm gonna go for a run. We'll see how the week closes, and I do anticipate a very volatile week ahead. I'm going to be updating you guys on a daily basis. So with that being said, make sure you subscribe, turn on your bell notifications, because everything in the cryptocurrency space is very time sensitive. So trade safe, guys. See you soon.